Okay, so I'm talking about social media. Can I just get a quick show of hands? Who here is on Facebook? Who here isn't on Facebook? That's probably what I should be saying. Claire. Sorry, someone I know, not on Facebook. What about, who blogs? Anybody blog? Yep, great. Anybody on LinkedIn? Excellent. And who's on Twitter? And who loves Twitter? I'll talk a little bit about Twitter later. Who thinks like this when they hear the phrase social media? Don't be scared. I know there's always a few hands. There's one at the back. Any more? A couple? Hopefully you won't feel that way when I finish. So social media is really changing the way that the world works, and doing what you've always done will no longer get you what you've always got. Social media is a fundamental shift in the way that business is happening and the way that organisations are connecting. When I talk about social media, there's hundreds and hundreds of different types, but these are the main ones that people use and are the most familiar with. So we've got LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, Twitter, and the W is for WordPress, which represents blogging. This is what happens roughly in a minute of every day. So 227,000 tweets are sent out. Amazon makes $83,000 in online sales every minute of every day. Apple users download 48,000 apps. Facebook users share nearly 2.5 million pieces of content in 1 minute. So you can, hopefully this is giving you a little bit of a sense of the scale of what social media is and how it's really taking over our online space and use today. I'm mostly going to be talking about Twitter because I believe that Twitter is the most useful and practical and easiest tool in terms of social media that you can use as a researcher in terms of getting information and sharing information. Twitter is a free service. It allows people to share information through sending and receiving tweets. You only have 140 characters, so it really teaches you to be succinct, although you can tweet over multiple tweets to get your message across. If someone's coming in on the third or the fourth tweet of, a bit of a story, they can miss the point. So it's good to be succinct. You can sign up if you haven't at twitter.com. It's really quick and easy to sign up. You just have to come up with a username, which my recommendation is that you use your own name if you can. So my Twitter handle, which you can see on the bottom of the screen, is just @melkettle. Or you could come up with if you don't want to share your own name, and if you're a bit unsure, then you can use a pseudonym. Twitter, I believe, is the best channel for direct communication. It's really quick, it's really easy, it takes a couple of seconds to send out a tweet. It's very, very cost effective in that you don't need to spend hours working out how to use it, you don't need to spend a lot of money in setting it up, and it normally is fairly quick and easy to understand. And I spend a lot of time in the supermarket. If I'm at the checkout waiting, that's when I'll have a quick look at Twitter. Or if I'm waiting for the bus, or if I'm on the train and I've got a spare 5 minutes, then I'll pull out my phone and I'll see what's happening on Twitter. It's really quick and easy just to have, read a few tweets, see what people are doing, read an article that somebody might have linked to through Twitter, and then share a few thoughts of your own. Twitter has a keyword search, so if there's a particular phrase that you're looking for or a particular area of research that you're interested in, you can do a search through a Twitter app to see what other people are saying in that space. It's fantastic for driving traffic to the web because you can put links to any URL, whether it's a YouTube site or whether it's an Instagram picture or whether it's an article that you've written or a blog post that you want to share, and people can then click on that link and read what you have to say or watch your video. It's the fastest growing form of social media at the moment as well. There's lots of reasons why I personally love Twitter. I've been personally very active on Twitter for 5.5 years, I'm thinking. And in that time, I've sent nearly 110,000 tweets. I follow just under 5,000 people, and just under 8,000 people follow me. I'm actually not quite sure why that is. Twitter, for me, has provided me in the last 5 years with probably 80% of the business referrals I get from people who follow me on Twitter or who know somebody who knows me on Twitter. I write a food blog, and I get a lot of inspiration and ideas for food-related things from Twitter. I've picked up a lot of new clients from Twitter. I've just recently finished doing a Master of Public Health, and I crowdsourced all of my assignments on Twitter. So my favourite example was in a lecture in my first semester when I had to write a paper on whether or not on the new smoking legislation on plain packaging of tobacco, and the legislation hadn't come in Australia. So I tweeted, "What do people think about plain packaging? Do you think it's going to have an impact on the number of people smoking in Australia and the number of new people taking up smoking?" By the time I got home 3 hours later, I'd been tweeted position papers by 3 cancer councils around the world, 4 heart foundations, half a dozen scientists who were independent of the Cancer Council and the Heart Foundation, about 50 or 60 people who had a personal opinion, and a number of different marketing agencies who'd done work on that topic. So that was pretty much the whole amount of research for that assignment. I just had to sit down later and collate it, and I got a high distinction for it. My lecturer made a comment of excellent wide range of research, and I told him later that Twitter gave me all the answers, and he said, "How does that work?" So I highly recommend that you encourage your students, if you teach, to get onto Twitter. Twitter has many characteristics that traditional media doesn't. It's in real time. What happens today is immediately broadcast on Twitter today. This is one of my favourite tweets of the last 12 months. This was tweeted out by Oreo during the last Super Bowl in February when the power went out. Do you remember that? Anyone, football fans, American football fans? The power all went out partway through the game, and so the stadium was in darkness, and Oreo tweeted this: "You can still dunk in the dark." Very, very clever. At the moment, there's a lot of world events happening in Ferguson, in Missouri, in the US, and my Twitter feed is full of what's happening immediately from people on the ground who are sharing what is going on right there, right now as it's happening. And when I was watching the news last night on Channel 9, I had to have a little chuckle because the majority of the images that they were using came from people on Twitter. Twitter is global. I love this tweet. Does everyone know who Commander Chris Hadfield is? He was an astronaut who spent quite a bit of time recently in space. His Twitter account was absolutely sensational, so if you haven't had a look at it, Google him later. But he had a bit of a conversation on Twitter with William Shatner. I love that. Twitter is also public. What happens on Twitter stays on the internet. It doesn't ever go away. Be very, very aware of what you say on Twitter. You can delete tweets, but they're never fully deleted. An excellent example of this is about 4 years ago. Somebody from Westpac who was tweeting on their behalf got their Twitter accounts confused and tweeted, "I'm so over it today." Within 5 minutes, Westpac had taken that tweet down, but not before it had been retweeted about 5,000 times. So a new piece of vernacular came out shortly after that, and people would be tweeting, "I'm having such a Westpac day." I think they should have left it up, personally, but they had a different opinion. Twitter is fantastic at connecting people. I mentioned that I follow about 5,000 people on Twitter. In the last 5 years, I've probably met 700 or 800 people in real life who I follow on Twitter. And not just in Brisbane, but all around the world. It has been it's such a great way of just opening doors. I have conversations with people on Twitter who are the peers in my industry who I would never be able to pick up the phone and call. This tweet highlights it for me. We Speechies is a rotation curation account that's run by some speech therapists. And a rotation curation account is where you have a different person managing the account every week. And one of them was asking, how many of us have met up with colleagues in real life because we follow them on Twitter? This pretty much sums it up for me. Twitter also changes perceptions. One of the accounts that I think does that really well is Real Scientists. It's also a rotation curation account, and it's one that I would encourage you to all follow if you don't already. Again, it's a different scientist every week who talks about their research. It's an Australian account, but it's run by scientists that contribute all around the world. They have all different areas of interest when it comes to science. They have all different perspectives about what science is to them. Some of them talk about how they got into having a career of science. Some of them talk about the pros and cons of science, of working in the field, and a lot of them talk about the research that they're doing. So it's just such a fabulous opportunity to ask questions and answer questions and share with people what your research is about in a way that generates interest. And a lot of the people that are on this account really do change people's perceptions of what science is. I'll make my slides available so you don't need to frantically try to write everything down on this slide. This is the role of Twitter in science publication and communication. And you can see on the bottom left-hand corner that it says 55% of academic Twitter users have received their PhD within the last 5 years. And this slide is about 6 months old. You can also get a bit of a feel for the kinds of people who are on Twitter who are following scientists, and it's not other scientists. It tends to be a lot of news organisations, journalists and policymakers. I follow a lot of journalists on Twitter, and I get a lot of leads to be the spokesperson or the expert on a subject matter that I can talk about because of my relationship with journalists on Twitter. Twitter does all of these things. All of social media does all of these things. It's a source and opportunity for giving and receiving publicity, for hiring staff, for influencing people with your opinions and your thoughts, for showing yourself as a thought leader, for building relationships, for sharing and for creating content, for generating goodwill. During times like the Brisbane floods, Twitter really came into its own because it provided an easy way that people who might have had no power but had a bit of power on their phone could find out what was going on and could tweet things like, one of my friends tweeted, "I live in Corinda, I have a friend staying with us with a baby, we've run out of milk. How can we get some milk? Where's the nearest shop to us that isn't flooded?" Because that was a flood zone. So really, practical solutions can happen through Twitter to problems. Using Twitter for research. Getting down to the nitty-gritty for you guys now. Twitter, as I mentioned with my uni experiences, it's a fantastic way of generating ideas and of finding out what else has been happening in your research space, of meeting people who you can collaborate with, of disseminating your findings and your papers. A friend of mine who's an academic at the University of Newcastle tweets out all of her papers, and she said normally she'd find, half a dozen people would read them, and now there's 700 to 800 people reading them because she shares them through Twitter. It's also a great way of finding new ways of collecting data. If you need volunteers for projects, I know that Griffith University is now tweeting out a lot of their research projects to help find people who can participate in some of them. It's a great way for finding jobs if you are a recent graduate, and it's a great way also of just sharing your knowledge and sharing what it is that you're interested in from a research perspective. If you teach, do any of you teach? A few? Great. It's a fantastic way of sourcing the most current materials. And it's also a great way of finding guest speakers and guest lecturers. I do quite a bit of guest lecturing, and all of the invitations have come through people who follow me on Twitter. Because you have to be brief, I find it really does improve your writing style, and because a lot of the people who are on Twitter are not experts in your scientific field, you need to be able to explain what you're talking about in plain English, so that people don't ask you what it is you're trying to say. It's also an excellent way of creating an online community, and not only is Twitter a great way of creating an online community, but also using Facebook groups and private groups are a great way of encouraging your students to work together. And it's also an excellent way of asking questions to experts and peers. I ask questions on Twitter every day, and it always amazes me who responds. And if I have specific questions for specific people whose opinions I would like to know, then I ask them, and probably 4 out of 5 times I get a response from that particular person. People like to be asked to help, and they like to feel needed. And Twitter is a great way of, allowing you to do that in a way that's fairly unobtrusive to their day-to-day life. A quick lot of Twitter do's and don'ts. Sign up. If you haven't signed up, I'm going to ask you all to do a piece of homework, sign up by the end of the week, and follow me so I know you have. You don't have to follow me for long, just say hello. Follow people. So follow people who you like. I follow, people that you might want to follow are people in your field, some journalists, people who share your same interests. So you don't only have to follow people in a work-related capacity. I follow, people who have a whole range of interests. If you don't know who to follow, then have a look and see who people who you like are following. Have conversations with people, and that's a great way of finding out more people to follow. There's a Twitter search function, so you can type in the names of people who you follow, and you can also upload your address book, and it will match by email address who is in your address book versus who has an account on Twitter, and it will give you the choice as to whether or not you want to follow those people. These accounts, probably some of the more relevant ones for you and some of my favourite. The conversation at the top, we'll be hearing from Liz after me. Croaky blog is an excellent source of information, as is their actual blog if you haven't read it. Real Scientists, as I mentioned, We Public Health, and Nutshell Australia, which is looking at Aboriginal health. But there's a lot of different accounts, so just type in your areas of interest into the search function and you'll come up with a few. Start tweeting. You've got 140 characters. Don't be afraid to use them all. You can include links. A lot of the Twitter apps now available on phones and online will automatically shorten a link once you put it in, so that will save you some characters. Engage by being engaging. There's no right and wrong way to do Twitter. I personally don't swear on Twitter. And there's certain ethical things that I will and won't say on Twitter, and that I do and don't retweet on Twitter because it goes against my personal ethical sense and moral judgment. But everybody has their own ethical sense and moral judgment, so you have to do what's right for you. If people say you're wrong on a tweet, try not to get into a big argument with them. Correct facts if people are factually incorrect on Twitter, but try not to correct opinions, because everybody is entitled to their own opinion. At the end of the day, if you don't like somebody's opinion on Twitter, just unfollow them. It's not difficult. Don't be afraid to be disliked. Some of the most popular Twitter people are not at all popular in terms of, being liked. Retweet, use the @ symbol and use hashtags. So retweeting means that you're retweeting something somebody else has said. If you use a hashtag, if you use the @ symbol before somebody, then that means that the person whose Twitter handle follows the @ symbol will be able to see clearly that you are trying to tweet something to them. And a hashtag is a fabulous way of following a conversation. So we have a hashtag today, which is TRI Seminar. So you can follow, for people who aren't here, or if you are here and want to see what other people are saying, you can just click on that hashtag in Twitter and follow it as if you were following another person and read a series of tweets. So I'll talk a bit about more hashtags in a minute. Here we go. So hashtags are great for following conferences, or if you're at a conference, or if you're going to be speaking at a conference, using that hashtag and encouraging people to follow it to find out what it is you're saying. It's a great way of also promoting an organisation, such as TRI or whatever your organisation might be, and it's a great way of getting support and following support. So a couple of hashtags that I really like are hashtag PhD chat. If you're doing a PhD and you need some support, there's a great group of PhD candidates who are on that, who use that hashtag to have conversations. ECR is Early Career Researcher, again, similar concept to PhD chat. Both of those also have weekly Twitter chats that go for half an hour to an hour at a regular time during the week that everybody is welcome to participate in. HCSM ANZ is Healthcare Social Media Australia and New Zealand. There's also HCSM, which is the American-centric, and HCSM EU for European, and they're excellent hashtags to follow as well. Share your story. I had a melanoma, it's my melanoma scar, 10 centimetres on my leg, and the amount of awareness that was raised through me sharing that photo on Twitter really quite blew my mind. And it just, sharing personal things about yourself are a great way of building relationships. Hopefully your way of sharing is a bit less ugly than that. Tweet regularly. It doesn't take long, but you do need to have a regular presence on Twitter if it's something that you choose to do. And listen to people. Don't just talk, don't just say, aren't I wonderful, look at me, look at me. Listen to what other people are saying and jump into conversations with them, start conversations with them. It doesn't matter whether you know them or not. I'll let you read this. And talk to people. I've talked a lot about talking to people. Be authentic. It's really obvious if you try to be somebody who you're not, mainly because it's just not sustainable to be fake. Don't be arrogant. Ask questions. I ask questions on Twitter all the time, particularly in work-related things. This is another one. I was writing a short paper on how social media drives change in the healthcare sector, and I had about 15 or 20 responses, and about half of those gave me really valid papers that I could use in another assignment. But there's lots of different ways you can ask questions. I'm spending a bit of time in Sydney for a client at the moment. Every time I go down, I say, I'm in this suburb, where should I have breakfast? Simple as that. I get great recommendations. Congratulate people. Share your achievements, and then when you see other people sharing their achievements, congratulate them. It might be somebody who's announcing a baby, or it might be somebody who's just announced, something that's important to them. Doesn't matter what it is. Just have a chat. I love this guy. He says, I try to talk on Twitter to people who I don't know because I'm really shy, and it's a great way for me to practice networking without the embarrassment of having to do it face to face. How clever is that? Say thank you. When you ask people for information and they provide it to you, say thank you. It's just a common courtesy that, should go from the real world to the online world. And the main things that you need to know about Twitter and about all forms of social media is that people will talk about the things that they want to talk about, and people will engage with you on topics that they want to engage with you about. So, use this as a guideline to talk about what people want to know. And you can take this information and you can transfer that to other forms of social media and other forms of work that you're doing. So if you write a blog and people are constantly asking you questions on Twitter about a specific topic, then that might help you come up with some new blog posts on that topic that you can write about, in a bit more detail and then share on Twitter. And that's it for me. Thank you. was saying earlier about get to know your communications team within your organisation, because they are always looking for great news that they can share about research and research outcomes. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mel.